Hey, I'm Mary Pierce. I'm the Vice Chair of the Historic Zoning Commission, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. And we'd like to welcome everybody to our March Historic Zoning meeting. We have no minutes for this evening because they're still being worked on to approve from the last meeting, so those will be brought forward at the next meeting. And we do ask if anyone has announcements, they can make them at this time if there are any community or general announcements.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. I have some staff announcements. This is Amanda Rose, the preservation planner. I did want to let everyone know that we have an upcoming design review committee meeting taking place on Monday, the 21st, a week from today, at 4:00 p.m. That agenda will be finalized tomorrow, and I will be able to post that and send that out to everybody. So we look forward to seeing you all there. I'm also excited to note that the final draft of the Historic District Design Guidelines is now published online for the public to view. We have worked through a series of meetings with the public, through open office hours, through neighborhood meetings, stakeholder meetings, the design review committee meetings several times to come up with the final draft that we will be presenting to the Historic Zoning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for consideration of approval. We will bring it to Historic Zoning for DRC to discuss in general next week, and then we will take it to Historic Zoning for a formal recommendation to the BOMA at its April meeting, and we will likely have it at BOMA by the end of May. So we're very, very excited about that. Please go to our city website and check those out if you haven't already, and feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. If there is anyone that would like to add a non-agenda item this evening, it is reserved for emergency instances, and non-agenda items shall be considered only upon the unanimous approval of all the Historic Zoning Commissioners. So is there anyone who wants to bring forward a non-agenda item? Okay. We have an opportunity for citizen comments on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone with us that would like to comment on an item that would pertain to the Historic Zoning Commission that is not on the agenda? Okay. It seems we have none. Let's see, if a citizen provide an email or comment to the commission via staff by the advertised deadline, the comment has been provided to the commission, and we did not receive any. Is that correct, Amanda? Yes. Okay. So item 1, I have been asked, item 1 we think is going to take a little bit of time, and item 2 is a very simple request, but it does require a demolition. So if it's okay with all the commissioners, I would like to do item 2 first and let that get out of the way. So, Amanda, item 2 will be our first item.
Okay, Ms. Hensley will cover that item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For item number 2, the applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a prefabricated accessory structure at the rear of the property located at 110 Lewisburg Avenue. The applicant is also seeking to demolish a non-historic shed. The proposed location for the new prefabricated accessory structure is at the rear of the property behind the principal building, which follows the guidelines. The footprint measures 10 feet wide by 12 feet long, and it has a 5/12 roof pitch, all of which also meet the guidelines for subordinate placement, size, mass, and intricacy. The materials are consistent with that on the principal building, and it'll be wood lap siding, similar to that found on the principal building. Now, there is a non-historic shed on the property that the applicant is seeking to demolish, as you can see on the screen. Because the shed is non-historic, its removal is appropriate. So it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the new accessory structure and the demolition of the non-historic shed with the following conditions. The non-historic shed must be satisfactorily photographed inside and out for commission records prior to its demolition. The applicant has actually already sent those in to us. The application must meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to the issuance of a building permit, and then any changes to the approved plans must be returned to the preservation planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Do we have a motion on this item?
Would it be possible for the applicant to speak?
Oh, yes, that would be possible. Excuse me a minute.
So we have Ms. Liz Sauer here representing the owners.
I'm sorry.
Another concern for the owners in their absence was obviously also the overall safety and integrity of the existing building. So he did want me to convey that as well.
Thank you. Okay, now, is there a motion from one of the commissioners?
I'll make motion. I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed alterations based on staff analysis and recommendation dated March 14th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have a proper motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I think it should be 2022.
Oh, it should be.
We have a
Yes,
typo.
that's true. Thank you for catching that. If there's no discussion, let's call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And we thank the applicant for item 1 for their patience. So Amanda, did you want to start the conversation with your comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The applicant for item 1 is seeking a preliminary recommendation request from the Historic Zoning Commission related to a development proposal that's been submitted to the City of Franklin for the Emmeline Acres subdivision, as you can see on the screen. This development is proposed along Franklin Road at the southeast and southwest corners of the intersection with Mack Hatcher Parkway, which is all located within the Historic Preservation Overlay. It consists of 21 single-family houses on the east side, and then a mix of multiplex and duplex buildings on the west side. I'm going to go ahead and scroll to a screen so you can see that a little more clearly. So west side, multiplex and duplex, east side, single-family. This item's been before the Historic Zoning Commission and the DRC several times before. Just for some context, the property also has a National Register listed building on the site. This is the Thomas Shute House, or more colloquially known as Creekside, which is dating to circa 1845. The applicant is also seeking this recommendation because it is a requirement of the City of Franklin that when a development plan is proposed, if it is in the Historic Preservation Overlay, the Historic Zoning Commission is asked to provide a recommendation where certain contextually sensitive design features become entitled prior to its review by the Commission for what we call certificates of appropriateness. And so this is a very conceptual level review. This is something where you're providing a recommendation on context sensitivity as related to the design guidelines to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission and then to BOMA for consideration as the development plan is considered for approval. I have a review of history here. This item has come before the Commission and the DRC several times before. The applicant appeared before the DRC to host a site visit in November, and then it also appeared before the DRC at its December and February meetings most recently. Because we've heard this, I won't go over each detail so specifically this time, but I will say that the guidelines do include general design policies and goals for each district. Within the Franklin Road Historic District, which the subject property is located, it does state that historic buildings should be preserved, the scenic view shed and defining topography and other landscape features around Harlansdale Farm should be preserved. An uncongested gateway into downtown should be provided that emphasizes the historic character of the community. That new construction should maintain a balance of buildings and roads and open space so as to continue to project an open rural appearance. The guidelines also have specific recommendations for exterior alterations, including new construction, the location of construction, the form of that construction, meaning more specifically your height, your massing, your scale, and also any setbacks from the roadways or from between the buildings. So in the past, with the various reviews and discussions we've had related to this item, staff has recommended varied side yard setbacks and lot widths that would allow for the construction of buildings to appear as single-family residential in scale and differ that mass, that shape, the height, so as to create a context that feels more organic and developed over time, as you would see up and down this Franklin Road historic corridor. The approach reinforces the guidelines that would recommend compatibility with adjacent buildings and the maintenance of an uncongested gateway into downtown, which would, in staff's determination, mean adequate space between the buildings. The Historic Zoning Commission identified Harlansdale Manor as an appropriate guide for building form, lot widths, spacing between buildings to help achieve the intent of the guidelines and staff's recommendations related to that. So you can see in the report that I've provided some analysis that's related to Harlansdale Manor. Those lots measure approximately 125 to 175 feet in width. The three houses along Franklin Road located in the Harlansdale Manor subdivision are spaced about 55 feet apart. And there's about 500 feet of open space along Franklin Road that consist of that. So about 500 feet, about 55 feet between each building. So on the east side of the proposal that you see here on the screen, the proposed frontages with Franklin Road, when I say frontage, I mean this line of buildings that literally sit at Franklin Road on each side. On the east side, the frontage has side yard spacing between 60 and 100 feet. The houses along Franklin Road are proposed to front that, and there's an open space requirement from the city of 150 feet setback from the roadway. So you see about 150 feet back here, and then anywhere between 60 and 100 feet between each of these 6 buildings that you see here. 6 including the Creekside Manor here. These elements are consistent with the recommendations, and the spacing between the houses on the internal portion of the development that you see here vary. There's a minimum separation of 20 feet between the buildings, which is not consistent with the recommendations. On the west side of Franklin Road, this is a mix of multiplex, meaning 4 units per building, and duplex, 2 units per building. Are proposed to be placed on a singular lot. This is not platted as individual lots, but one lot as proposed. The buildings are proposed to be spaced between 50 and 100 feet apart along this frontage, which is mostly consistent with the recommendations. The internal ones here are proposed to be a minimum of 20 feet apart, which is not consistent with the recommendations. During the February meeting of the DRC recommended that the applicant create a more organic rhythm of massing and setbacks along the Franklin Road corridor, and stated that the proposal does not achieve an open rural appearance recommended by the guidelines, especially on this west side. And the DRC recommended that the applicant provide greater separation between buildings internal to the lot, and thus create a more open rural character as recommended by the design guidelines. The applicant has worked to provide a more organic rhythm of massing and front yard setbacks along these Franklin Road frontages. You can see there's variations in where they sit, so they're not all in a single line. The massing has been adjusted so that they're not all massed the same up and down the line here. The proposal does maintain the same number of houses and buildings, however, and does not therefore maintain an open rural appearance as recommended by the DRC over the several meetings that the DRC has entertained with the applicant. Of note is the closely situated row of multifamily or duplex buildings along Daniel McMahon Lane here. These buildings are no more than 20 feet apart, as interpreted by the key here, and the frontages are toward the neighboring property, which means that the garage doors will all be facing toward Franklin Road. There is a liner of buildings here, but because of the closeness of these buildings and the lack of separation as recommended by the DRC between these buildings, it will be inevitable that you see a number of these garage doors from Franklin Road, which is not consistent with the context of this historic district. Lessening the number of buildings at this location would better alleviate that incompatible condition and address the DRC's comments as related to an open rural appearance. The applicants provided conceptual architectural elevations for single-family, multifamily, and duplex buildings. While it's more appropriate for the Historic Zoning Commission to review these considerations later for what we call certificates of appropriateness, staff did want to note that, building forms such as height, massing, scale, and location are very much important to a development plan stage and should be noted at this time. The elevations will require significant form and scale changes in order to meet applicable guidelines. This is a 2.5-story building, which is not recommended in this historic district. There are a number of form changes, massing changes that seem to be inconsistent with what you see on the site plan that will be worked through by the Historic Zoning Commission if the development plan is approved by the BOMA. With all that, this application has come forward plenty of times, and the applicant has worked to meet many of the recommendations of the DRC and staff, with the exception of the adequate space between buildings. So rather than ask the applicant to continue to revise that comment, address that comment, the applicant would like to move forward with this. So it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission consider what's before you today. This work does represent improvement to the proposal at closer adherence to the guidelines. There are some exceptions, as I just noted. So with that, it's recommended that the Commission provide a preliminary recommendation of approval to the FMPC and BOMA with some conditions. The preliminary recommendations based on the conditions as follows: that the applicant reduce the number of buildings to achieve a consistent spacing between buildings throughout the development that reflects the spacing between buildings proposed along Franklin Road in order to achieve that rural open appearance that the guidelines recommend. So adequate spacing between buildings, as you see along the line of Franklin Road, but between all buildings on the development, more or less. The applicant is recommended to revise the elevations, or just note that the proposed elevations will require significant form and scale changes in order to meet the applicable guidelines, including the introduction of detached garages along the Franklin Road frontages, because that is a very key characteristic of this corridor. Please note that the Historic Zoning Commission is only providing a preliminary recommendation to the Planning Commission and to the BOMA on whether or not this conceptual proposal, as you see it today, meets the intent of the guidelines. This is not approving anything for any sort of construction at this time. It does not bind the Historic Zoning Commission to this plan if the plan is approved by the BOMA, so that any sort of form, massing, height, architectural changes that are determined to be necessary to meet the guidelines can be achieved at a later date if approved by BOMA to do so. Any questions from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, if the applicant wants to come forward and introduce themselves, I think Christian, you're representing the project.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm
tonight.
Christian Dial, Vice President of Development at CIG Communities. We've gone through a rebranding and a name change during our process of going through this site. But just wanted to be here to answer any questions. I apologize, I couldn't make the DRC meeting last month, but I was listening in to all the commentary and appreciate all the feedback that came through. We did our best to incorporate as many comments as we could on this plan. We understand that staff had some good recommendations as well, and so we're willing to meet the conditions that were put forth or strive to meet those as we move forward or potentially move forward in front of Planning Commission in BOMA. So we would like to try to figure out how we can increase separation between buildings around the back sides of the site as well, and kind of use, like Amanda said, Harlansdale Manor as a contextual way to approach that as well. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'm here.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions at this point for the applicant? Or we'll just go to citizen comments and then have discussion, and somebody may want to ask you something. We do have Mercer Darden here, who wishes to speak as a citizen. And if you give your address,
I'm sorry,
your address.
2010 Heartland Road, Franklin.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the Historical Zoning Commission, thank you. My name is Mercer Darden. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of Franklin First United Methodist Church at the southwest corner of Mac Hatcher and Franklin Roads. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this issue this evening on behalf of my board and of my church. I also want to note that I've got a number of church members here that in support of our position in this matter. First of all, I'm a bit confused. I recall that in its December 2021 session, and again in formal session on 21 February, the Design Review Committee unanimously directed that any future version of this project should be within the current zoning parameters of a state residential. It appears, however, that the project resubmission under consideration today does not conform to that directive or to the overall vision for this, the last undeveloped gateway into historic Franklin. The proposed 17 structures within the approximately 13.44 acres on the west side of Franklin Road seemingly and simply does not compute to the current zoning requirement of 1 unit per 2 acres. Additionally, as we understand this latest concept, the Emmeline Acres project on the western side of Franklin Road persists in assuming that our church will concur in the abandonment of the lower stretch of McMahon Way so that a new access can be created from Franklin Road through the proposed residential area. This assumption is totally incorrect. Such action would open our church-owned parking lots and roadways for general access through our property to the intersection of the light at Mac Hatcher, thus converting them into a de facto public thoroughfare through our property with exponentially increasing levels of traffic and the resultant increased congestion and potential legal liabilities. The proposed convoluted double curve would additionally create confusion for our members and safety issues for the church by constricting this second of 2 required emergency entrances into our property. Furthermore, this proposal would negatively impact our Phase 2 building plan, which includes a main sanctuary on our property east of the current structure. Significantly, this Phase 2 plan was previously developed and documented with the City of Franklin. It was not developed simply in response to this issue. Conversely, we can find absolutely no positive impact of the Emmeline Acres project to Franklin First United Methodist Church. And on a larger scale, we do not believe that this project is consistent with the overall vision for the northern gateway into historic Franklin. Our position in this matter has been stated numerous times, both verbally and in writing, to the developer and to the city of Franklin. In a simple nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, Franklin First United Methodist Church must once again respectfully submit that we cannot support abandoning the lower portion of McMahon Way for the purpose of this proposed project.
Okay. Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I submit a copy of this for the record?
Sure. We do not,
Ms. Pierce, may I speak to that, please?
yes.
So the role of the Historic Zoning Commission this evening is to review the application in light of the considerations that apply to the Historic District Design
Right.
Guidelines. Any roadway realignment or alterations of any kind would be vetted by the City of Franklin staff as a whole if the applicant submits this to the Planning Commission for review.
Right.
At this point, this commission is not giving a recommendation on the roadway alignment. If your recommendation is approval this evening or denial this evening or deferral this evening, it has nothing to do with the roadway
But
alterations.
But his comment on that they believed it did not fit in with the character is a comment that this board can consider, but not the roadway.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. We just wanted to get our position on the record.
Yes, sir.
We
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And I'm happy to take that to put it in the record if you'd like. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay. Is there a motion from the board for the purpose of?
There's someone else.
Oh, we have another person. Come forward, please.
Sir.
And if you'll just state your address, Mr. Sims.
Hi, my name's Alan Sims. I live at 119 Lewisburg Avenue over by Omar College. I came before this board over a year ago, I think, when the plan was first brought forth, and I simply said, we can do better. And I still believe that. As this gentleman just stated, this is the last undeveloped corridor into historic Franklin. Surely, we can do better. I'm afraid that this particular developer just doesn't get it. We want something unique, and we want something interesting, and Franklin deserves that, and I say we wait until we get a plan like that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion for the purpose of discussion, or do you all choose to discuss first?
I'll make a motion. My motion is to deny a recommendation that this plan, as submitted, be presented to BOMA.
Okay.
I'll
Is-
second that.
And you'll second that, okay. Is there any discussion?
So just to clarify, is that a recommendation of denial to the FMPC in BOMA?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd like to explain the reasons that I see. Staff has said that the proposal as submitted now, which has been through several iterations, is getting closer to what the intent of the guidelines are looking for. And in my opinion, it's not close enough. Context is everything related to scale. And so if you look at the context as presented, as compared to the neighboring area, it does not preserve the rural character that is so important for this area of Franklin.
Anyone else wish to comment?
I do have a comment just on the background of this property. So in November of 2000, the BOMA actually voted to downgrade the zoning on this property to estate residential.
That's right.
And they did it specifically because they said it had pertained to the gateway into Franklin and being one of our last historically unaltered corridors into Franklin. And that, I think as a board, we take that under serious consideration in whether we approve or deny. And given that, I would have to vote to deny the proposal as it stands.
Are there anyone else that wish to comment?
I'll just make a short comment. I mentioned this at the last meeting, that this is essentially our Monticello. You know, Roper's Knob is our Monticello. And I think as much as we can, we need to create something that when people get to the top of Roper's Knob, they're comfortable with it and they feel good about it.
Any count? Do you want anyone else?
I'll make a couple comments that follow my fellow commissioners. I think that I agree with what Lisa and others have said, certainly, and I think I'm also in favor of sending a recommendation for denial or of disapproval. But, you know, constructively speaking on what changes happened since the design review, I think the organic nature that we spoke of in the DRC is reflected well on the east side, and the spacing is a little more appropriate. I think on the west side, to me, the undulation in the fronts of the buildings is almost too dramatic. In historic neighborhoods we see here, in Franklin, Nashville, other historic cities, there were still front setbacks, and people built relatively close to them, and I see, 40-foot difference between the middle buildings near the sea and some of the others, and that is very organic, as in no order at all, would be perceived, I think, driving down the road, whereas the east side of the property, or the east side of Franklin Road there, has some undulation with what looks like some different roof forms and massing that's minor kind of organic moves, I think, are more appropriate. And then echoing the others' comments that the amount of buildings that happen on that west side is just too much in the view sheds between buildings. It's going to look like, in terms of view shed, like continuous walls. There's no green between. And I think you could even do a study looking through these little gaps, and you probably won't see much of the church. And I think that'd be unfortunate. It's supposed to be a diverse neighborhood with open space. So those are my comments.
Well, my comments would be that the massing and scale is everything. There are 8 buildings more than the current zoning allows, and I feel like it's a situation where we need every inch of space we can to make it work. It's such an important gateway. I don't know if any of y'all have read this book, Rural by Design, but I did have Randall Arendt here on 2 or 3 occasions, and I believe there are many ways to skin a cat, but this honestly looks like suburbia on, to me, what is a significant, very significant gateway into Franklin that affects everything about our community. So I will be voting to recommend denial of an endorsement. So with that said, is there any comments you wanted to make, Kathy? Being you're the only one.
I just concur with what everyone said, and my comment was this proposal does not reflect, it's the same number of buildings in this proposal. So, and we've asked for reduction.
The other thing that I would say, the massing of the buildings on the church side are all exactly alike. And I think when we were talking organic, we were talking how the buildings appeared, and these are all, a lot of these, I think all but maybe 2 or 3 are uniform size. So we have a motion and a second to deny. We've had discussion, so we'll vote. All those in favor of recommending against this proposal to the Planning Commission and BOMA, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I looked at Bill.
Okay, Bill, is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Everyone for the motion to deny, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So, thank you. And item 3 is consideration of alterations at 412 Main Street. Chisel Workshop is the applicant, and staff comments are,
Wait just a moment.
wait a minute, okay.
Hello.
Well, hello. We're going to have staff comments first, if you don't mind.
You just
I'm
could wait
killing
to get up
time.
here.
Yeah.
She's here. Killer time, saying hi.
Amanda, are you, or Victoria, if you want to go ahead with.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you guys mind stepping out, sir? We're going to go ahead and continue the agenda. Thank you.
The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for alterations on the rear elevation at 412 Main Street. So they are proposing to replace an existing door with a new door that is approximately 6 inches wider than what is existing. The new door will be located in the same space as the existing door, which is on a non-historic addition on the rear facade. Although the new door is proposed to be wider, it will not disrupt any historic brick because it will be located on that non-historic addition. The applicant is proposing the new door to be fiberglass or steel solid 2 panel, which does not fully meet the guidelines, which recommend a single light glass and wood door. However, again, that door will be located on the rear of the building and it will not serve as a customer entrance. Therefore, it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the alterations with the following conditions. The door specifications must be approved by the Preservation Planner or the Historic Zoning Commission prior to the issuance of a building permit. The application must meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to the issue of a building permit. And finally, any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the Preservation Planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would you like to
Absolutely.
introduce yourself?
I am Amanda McCrary. I'm an architect with Chisel Workshop. Yes, so this portion of the building, we know that this building was sold in 1979, and in 1982, the review appeal moved out of it. Given the interior finishes in this particular addition, we would assume somewhere in that time period is when this addition was put on. The door currently is 3 foot wide. For our purposes moving forward, and you'll hear more from me later in the month on that, we really have to have 42-inch door in order to move our goods into this space. We do intend on using the rear for loading and unloading, and we really need a clearance of 42 inches. So we are requesting that the door get wider. We are showing a solid wood door, the 2-panel design, so that way it stays within that look of that glass on the top. We would prefer for it to be a solid door from a security standpoint, as this is the rear facing. There are quite a few doors along that block of Main Street that are solid. That's all I have.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve or deny the application?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve with conditions. C of A.
Thank you. Is there a
I
second?
second that.
Second. Okay, is there any discussion?
Staff has a question if the commission doesn't have any questions. Ms. McCurry just mentioned, unless I misunderstood, that this would be a wood door, but the application
No, a
says
solid door, yes.
Okay, so not fiberglass, not steel?
No, we'd prefer for it to be it's still a solid core inside
Okay.
the fiberglass or steel door.
I swear I just thought you said it would be a
I
wood
thought you
door.
did too.
I may have. No, we would still like for it just to be a solid steel or fiberglass door
Okay.
from a security purpose.
Okay,
Yes,
we
thank
just
you for
wanted to
clarifying.
clarify
Yes.
before any votes made.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No wood.
Thank you.
I'm probably used to standing up here saying solid wood doors, and that
Yeah.
is probably where that came from.
Is there any other discussion? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More on this item next week.
Okay, we're now to item 4, consideration of partial demolition and addition to the principal structure and demolition of an accessory structure and new construction of accessory structure at 215 Lewisburg Avenue and 906 Studio. Architects are the applicant. And Matt Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The applicant is requesting a COA for the series of work you described, which more specifically is the removal of the rear porch from the principal building, as you see here on the site plan in this area. The demolition of a non-historic carport, which is located to the immediate rear of the existing house. The removal of synthetic siding from the principal building. The construction of an upper-level addition at the back of the building, and a single-story rear addition onto the back of the building as well, and the construction of a 1.5-story garage recessed to the rear of the property. The applicant appeared before the DRC at its January and February meetings. I'm going to go to the photographs the applicant provided. So you can see the front view of the property from Lewisburg Avenue, and this is the rear. This is a porch that is proposed to be demolished. The guidelines recommend against the demolition of historic buildings and structures. While the exact date of construction is unknown, this is not a contemporary portion to the front that you see here. We do not know the exact age. It is estimated to be post-1950s, and it does not appear to have any adverse impact on the house or the historic district if the porch is removed. So it is recommended that the commission support that. As for the carport, there's a photograph in here.
Amanda,
Here.
should we
Yes, ma'am.
take these one at a time, do you think, or?
Staff is recommending 3 different motions, so I will
Okay,
just cover,
3,
I'm just
okay.
going to cover each motion at a
That'd
time
be
unless you,
great.
okay.
Okay.
So the next demolition request is for a carport. You see that non-historic carport at the bottom photograph on the screen here. The exact date of construction is unknown, but it does not appear to be historic, so its removal would not have an adverse impact on the property or the district. And then the first motion proposed by staff also includes the removal of synthetic siding from the overall existing principal structure. You can see that this is a beautiful Cape Cod building, but it has been covered with the synthetic siding. Its original material would have been wood. The applicant is proposing to remove that siding. The guidelines do support removing synthetic siding and restoring the building's original appearance. The applicant's proposing to repair and replace wood siding as needed. That's presumed to be underneath this synthetic siding. I don't know for sure. I think an investigation needs to be done, but in accordance with the guidelines, one should minimize replacement of wood siding to elements that are so severely damaged that replacement's the only option. And further limits to say that no more than 25%, a quarter of any one facade should be replaced in collectively. So the first motion that staff recommends is related to those demolition requests and to the removal of the siding. It's recommended the commission approve this portion with the conditions that the applicant submit photographs of the areas proposed to be demolished prior to doing so for commission records. If wood siding exists underneath the synthetic siding, that it would be minimized to be replaced only in cases where it's so severely damaged it cannot be repaired, and that no more than 25% of each facade be replaced. A wood replacement analysis must be presented to staff for approval prior to any of that work commencing. And then if we find that no wood is underneath, which does happen occasionally, the applicant would need to use wood to go back. Further, the application must meet all the other requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to issuance of the building permit. Any changes to this plan, after approved, would need to come back to the commission for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on this first phase of the project, which is the partial demolition and the demolition of the accessory structure and the removal of the synthetic siding on the principal structure?
Ms. Pierce, would you like the applicant to speak to that first?
Well, that
and then,
would be very
and
nice.
then maybe
'cause I
public
forgot that
comment?
part. I'm a little rusty. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mike, would you like to
Sure, thank you guys.
introduce yourself?
Yes,
and
ma'am. I'm
speak?
Mike Hathaway, 906 Studio Architects, here with Matt Smith. We appreciate all the effort that you guys have helped us through this process, through DRC and other comments. Our goal is to make this house as beautiful as it can be and be a contributing part of the community. So if I can comment each motion, that would be great. I'm just going to comment right now on demolition and tell you we would appreciate your support. We believe that to make this as good as it can be, that the rear porch, which is not original from what we can tell, needs to be demolished, and we are looking forward to bringing the siding back to closer to original condition. So we'd appreciate your support.
Thank you. Excuse me that I've stepped over you.
Not a problem.
Okay. Now, is there a motion on phase one to approve or disapprove?
Madam Chair, can we ask for public comment?
Yes, we can do that too, because I forgot that too.
And this would be specific to demolition
yes.
and the siding removal.
For the demolition and the siding, is there anyone here that wishes to comment on this phase? No, okay. So now we will get to what I was jumping to, the motion.
I'll make the motion. It is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve this portion of the proposal with the following conditions. Do I need to read those?
I don't think.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll
Is there-
second.
Second. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It was all ayes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
And now
Chair.
we'll move to the second part.
So the second portion of the application recommendation before you is for the addition to the principal structure. There are two portions to this, and so I will cover the analysis for that now. The guidelines recommend that additions be clearly designed to be contemporary and subordinate with the proportions, forms, materials, and details of the building, and be limited to no more than half of the footprint of the original building. The original building is defined to include all portions of the building that are at least 50 years in age. So we do allow for some growth and change over time and interpretation of that historic footprint. The historic building must be clearly identifiable, and its physical integrity must not be compromised by the new addition as through approaches that would unify the existing structure and new construction into a single architectural whole. The guidelines support placement of additions on rear obscured elevations, and they also note that sometimes visual prominence may not always meet the intent of the guidelines as well. So moving forward, you can see this is the location of the existing house in the new addition on the site plan. I'm going to go to the elevations. This is I'm going to start with the left elevation. This is the left elevation, and then this is the rear elevation. The proposed addition is situated at the rear of the residence. There is an upper level component. You can see kind of from this left elevation, maybe a little better than from the rear, that appears to be a very large shed dormer that cantilevers onto a single-story portion. Now, I'm going to turn over to the model. You'll see that a little better on the model. This is the right side of the building. You see this shed dormer does cantilever over onto the one-story rear-mounted component of the building to a degree right here. The ground level addition consists of a hipped roof, and it is parallel to the wall of the rear wall of the existing house. So it goes across, follows that form. There is a pergola that fills in the absence there. So the pergola connects the two ground-mounted elements between the dormer, the single-story element, and then the gable extension here. The incorporated insets, offsets, and material changes do differentiate the form from that of the historic structure. The guidelines do recommend that dormers use designs, materials, and scale in keeping with building character and support the use of roof dormers in lieu of wall dormers. So what you're seeing here is a dormer that is sized to the point it's oversized for the roof. And it comes over onto this single-story element. It does not meet the intent of a roof dormer or a wall dormer because it actually exceeds the wall to a degree. The DRC did ask that the applicant consider pushing this portion that is visible from the side elevation on either side inward, so it does sit on the wall, and then push perhaps outward at a later point. But you do still very much see that the dormer is overscaled and does sit on the single-story element, which is in contrast to the recommendations of the guidelines. The cantilever design does not have any historical equivalents that we can find in this district. As for the size of the addition, the footprint of the proposed ground level addition measures, and we're just talking about ground level because this is on a roof here, but the portions that are on the ground only measure 740 square feet, which is approximately 60% of the historic structure, minus the porch proposed for removal. This addition size is not consistent with the guidelines, which recommend that additions be limited to no more than the half of what's remaining that's historic, which would be everything that you currently see minus that rear porch. As for the materials, they're proposed to be a standing seam metal at the dormer here, asphalt shingle roofing at the lower level, the timber pergola, cementitious lap siding of a 5-inch reveal, in a stucco foundation, all of which are consistent with the guidelines. I did fail to note, however, that the siding is proposed at 5-inch reveal. We don't know what the siding looks like underneath. So the siding probably needs to relate to whatever is currently on the building, and we need to look at that. So with that stated, we've already covered the synthetic siding removal. It is recommended that the commission deny the addition proposal of the application, as the footprint is about 60% of the historic building, which is not consistent with the guidelines. The rear dormer is designed out of scale with the historic house. Its cantilever design does not have, it's not typical to historic equivalents. The guidelines do recommend using dormer scale and designs and materials in keeping with building character and support the use of roof as opposed to wall dormers. If issued a COA, the new windows must have historic profile and dimension and be approved by staff prior to issuance of a building permit. and the application must meet all the other requirements of the BNS department with any changes coming to staff or the commission for review and approval. And as I noted, I failed to clarify the siding reveal, so if the commission does choose to support approval, I would caution you to note that as part of your conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, would you have anything to add?
Sure. I'll start with a couple things. As you guys know, these are guidelines, so you've got discretion to look at each case individually and understand how it applies. Not to get to detail, but we're actually 59.6, not quite 60, but regardless, we are over the 50%, and some of that is in looking at the overall size of this lot. If you've seen the lot, it's very, very deep, much bigger than a typical lot would be in the downtown area. So, and we have worked hard to push this addition to be totally in the rear. It's very difficult to see from the street as you drive by. So we believe that the 60% or the 59.6% is okay in this case because of that that we've decreased the width of it to be behind the original form, and in no way, I know the 50% rule is to make sure that new additions don't swallow up the original home and create basically a massive house versus an addition to an original historic house. We believe the way we've designed this, that it's done that it's reduced in size and width and feels more like an addition to a house and again, maintains the character of the original home. As we're looking at the addition of the dormers, I know that you guys have given us a lot of feedback at DRC about how to try to accomplish this. We are trying to create usable bedrooms on that second level and need that additional depth. So if you probably have seen in different areas where a wall dormer in this case is used because of being as wide as it is, we would never propose a wall dormer on the front of a house, definitely in the historic district. So we agree and understand that this would not be the case if we did this on the front. We also, again, know the guidelines are just that it's trying to cover every condition that might be necessary. And in our mind, this is a unique situation. We are, I guess cantilever, if that's the right term, we are extending this dormer out over the roof of the rear, so it's not just hanging out there for one. It's actually sitting on top of another roof, so I don't believe it's going to, in total, read like it's dominating the house. Again, it's in the rear, so we would ask you to consider that as well in your decision-making. But with all that said, we would recommend and appreciate your approval of this. We believe that we're making this house usable in the current lifestyle and market, and believe it's still going to be maintained as a beautiful historic home. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Right. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on this project? If you'll come up and introduce yourself. Huh? For the addition. For the addition, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Gail Haddock, and I live at 213 Lewisburg Avenue on the town side of this property. And I came tonight mainly about the garage, which I will discuss later. But to me, the dormer is very oversized also, and that is the main thing that I will see from my house. I frankly didn't sort of think I had a right to object to the dormer because I thought that the board really mainly considered things that you can see from the street. And since it's behind the street, you know, that I didn't, that it sort of wasn't under the purview of this board. But I did discuss that with someone today, and apparently you all do consider, you know, the total structure. Mm-hmm. And so I think that dormer on the back, to me, is oversized. It's very unappealing, and it's very different. You know, for a neighbor to the side, there's one thing to look up at a peak of a roof and something entirely different for, you know, that bulk of it to be up there. So I would object to that dormer also. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay. Is there anyone that wants to make a motion regarding this addition to the principal? You can't hear me? That's the first.
That is the first.
Is there anyone that, on the commission that wishes to make a motion regarding the principal addition?
Madam Chair, I move to defer to the next voting meeting of the Historic Zoning Commission.
Okay. There's been a motion made to defer on the addition to the principal structure. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. There's a
April 11th, Historic Zoning
mission, April 11th. There's a motion and a second to defer to the next voting meeting.
So, Madam Chair.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, one of the reasons for that is to give the applicant time to consider what staff's comments and comments that are going to be made here tonight as well, because they're very legitimate about the dormer on the rear. And then I have some questions about the roof pitch. What is the roof pitch of this current dormer we're seeing, this wall dormer? It almost looks flat.
It's probably about 1 in 12.
Closer to half 12. And, personally, I would like to see something that's more in keeping with what you would see historically rather than a half 12. That is creating like a second story on a one-story structure. I will say to the applicant's desire to the 59.6%, that I am sympathetic somewhat with that, because what we're seeing is currently the footprint of the buildings are 11% of that lot coverage. That's a large lot and a small house. So I would be more sympathetic to consider that more. But with the wall dormer and the way I think that needs to have some extra consideration.
Are there any other discussion? Yes?
When I look at the rear elevation, I would not know that this is a Cape Cod house style of a house from the rear elevation. So I think it's sort of a missed opportunity to bring it up to current living style. And I would like to see that modified to be more in keeping with the style of the home.
And one thing that may help, looking at the actual plans, the floor plans, when I started counting bedrooms, it looks like this Cape Cod in its current configuration becomes a 4-bedroom house. And I'm wondering if you only had 1 bedroom upstairs, that would solve some of the problems of trying to get 2 bedrooms in the upstairs, plus help you reduce the size of that dormer.
It's something we can sure look at.
What's the bearing height of the dormer wall? Do you remember? Is it 8-foot ceiling?
It's an 8-foot ceiling, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I would look at too, is the flat roof thing. It looks like a big box on top of the roof. And I get where you're going with it because you need the volume, but it's not uncommon, especially on older homes, that there's some lower bearing heights, at least on the dormers. Beds fit on 5-foot knee walls all day long, and a 7-foot bearing would really help the pitch of the roof look very different. It wouldn't look flat anymore. And I think what's weird looking at the back elevation is that we can't really tell where the ridge of the original house is. I mean, I know there's a line there and that's what it is, but from the ground or anywhere else, it's going to look like, where's this thing end at the top? And that's part of our job, is to protect this kind of historic silhouette of this house from all the sides. So even if where the dormer ties into the ridge now, or below the ridge, stays right where it is, but that bearing height comes down, at least it gives us a perspective in which our eye travels past this false ridge of the dormer up to the real ridge. And we can kind of see that in a way that preserves that silhouette, I think, in more authentic way. I mean, that and, you know, the dormer's almost the entire width of the main mass of the house, and that's a lot. It really is. But I sympathize with you because, you know, clients ask you for a 4-bedroom house, like, and you can't do it on the ground because there's so much space there. So it's a puzzle.
Well, yes, and I would say the overage is not my concern as much as the massing and form, because it's a huge lot.
Yeah.
With a smaller home on it. Okay, anyone else? I think okay, yes.
I guess I understand why you have the larger windows in the rear, but if you're introducing another window configuration onto this house. So I don't know if there's some way you can rethink that, you know, maybe have the smaller window with a panel below it or something, but it just seems like that configuration's not fitting with the original house.
I know part of the intent is to, you know, there's always the discussion about making sure the addition is not contemporary to the original. So that was part of that, is it would be clearly new and different. But we can definitely look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then we will, the motion is to defer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So this will be deferred to the next meeting, this phase of the project. And the third consideration is the new construction of the accessory building and staff.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the third motion, which would be the remainder of the application, is specific to the garage proposal at the rear of the property. I am going to go to those elevations. As a reminder, though, I'm going to go to the site plan first. As everyone noted, this is a somewhat narrow but very deep property. So from Lewisburg Avenue, this is the existing house, that was the proposed addition, and then the new garage is to the rear here. And I'm going to go to the elevation set. The applicant's proposing to build that new accessory structure at the rear of the property. The guidelines recommend that accessory structures be constructed in traditional locations behind the principal building and designed to be visually subordinate in massing, placement, size, and intricacy to the respective principal structures. The guidelines also recommend that accessory structures be designed to be shorter in height than and designed to be consistent with the context of the principal buildings they serve. Architectural details should complement but not visually compete with the character of the historic principal structure. A new accessory building should use components typical in historic equivalents. So this proposed structure is located at the rear, approximately 130 feet back from the principal building. It is a location that's supported by the guidelines. The location is further back than some of the garages on this street, but it is behind the structure in a traditional location. The applicant is proposing to push it further back to help further differentiate it from the form on the principal structure, and has turned the massing so it is perpendicular to Lewisburg Avenue to help mitigate perceptions of increased massing as well. I'm going to go back to the elevation set. The DRC recommended a softer treatment be utilized for the front elevation because the massing is turned. The previous rendition did have the appearance more or less of a second principal structure on the lot. It was fenestrated to have the appearance of a house. And so the applicant has worked to try to mitigate that. The proposal at first was maybe a mock garage door. The applicant spoke with me and did not want to go that route, but did put a pedestrian door with a single punch window here, which would be a softer appearance than what was proposed previously. The proposed materials include a cementitious lap of a 5-inch reveal, carriage-style doors, an asphalt shingle roof with a standing seam metal at the dormers, and a stucco foundation. The garage door and exact window specs have not been provided at this time. The dormer on the left elevation is a bit larger. It does tie into this gable to a degree that isn't quite as typical to historic equivalents, but it is recessed pretty far back on the structure. It does allow the applicant to get this garage height a full foot shorter than the house as viewed from that grade that's closer to the street. The grade does fall slightly from the house to the proposed structure location at the rear, so it would have the appearance of being a 1 foot lower technically, and then perhaps even another foot lower from a topography standpoint. So the dormer, as shown, would not be highly visible from anyone other than the neighbor on the left side of the property. The size is 990 square feet for a footprint, which is mostly consistent with the guidelines. That foot lower has been addressed. The eave height has not been altered. From what I can tell, is recommended by the DRC, but the height has been mitigated in another way, and the applicant can clarify as to how that was achieved. The proposed cumulative lot coverage, as has been intimated by the commission on the previous discussion, is very low. The proposed coverage on the lot would be 11.3% had the addition been approved as well, including this part of the application. So it is very much consistent with the guidelines, and that does not exceed the 35% recommendation. With that said, it's recommended that the commission approve the proposed garage with conditions that the window and door specifications be submitted to staff for review in light of the guidelines prior to issuance of a permit. I will also note that I did fail to note that the siding reveal should probably be comparable to that's unveiled on the principal structure, so that would need to be determined. Probably with the Cape Cod, it might be 5. It might be wider. I would imagine it's somewhere around that, but we'd like it'd be recommended that the siding reveal be matched that on the house, and I would encourage you to include that as part of a motion to approve if that's how you choose to move forward. Any other recommendations of the DRC have been addressed as far as I'm aware. So the application must also meet the requirements of the BNS department prior to issuance of a building permit. And any changes moving forward be vetted through staff to determine if that can be staff approved or come back to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Applicant?
I don't think we have any extra comments to add. We'd appreciate your approval and talking to Amanda and staff about what to do. We feel like we've complied with what's been requested, so we appreciate your approval.
Thank you.
Add one comment.
Yes.
Since the.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Matthew Smith, 906 Studio Architects. Since the last DRC meeting, we lowered by 12 inches the height of the garage by reducing the height of the ceiling height of the garage space from 9 feet to 8 feet, and then providing a 7-foot garage door. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any citizen comments?
If it's all right, Amanda, I did bring some copies of photographs that I would like to give you and the members of the.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can manage to hand.
Ms. Haddock, if you will lower the speaker, I think
Speaker a
it'll
little,
help.
yeah.
That's for you, and I can.
I can pass this out.
Okay.
You go ahead and start speaking.
Okay.
And if you'll introduce yourself again, Gail.
I'm Gail Haddock,
Thank you.
and I live at 213 Lewisburg Avenue, which is next door to this on the town side. So I see the left elevations of these two structures. And what I've passed out to you all is the view from my back door. That view is a little bit at an angle, but I love my backyard, I have a really pretty lot there. And if this garage apartment is put that far back and it's only going to be 7 feet from my property line, I mean, when you go behind my house, that's what you're going to see. It's going to dominate the whole view there, which to me is sort of heartbreaking, frankly. And I think it's really going to look like another house back there because of the size and the height of it. And also, I will see the view of that dormer that's on that side, which is, to me, it's unattractive, not only from the side, like the part I'll see for the house itself, but when you look straight at it, it looks like a flat-roofed house. And it's just, I think one of you all said, and I had said this to myself, it's like boxes jammed up into the roof. It's just sort of overpowering. And I hate to see that. And I also, to me, putting this garage at the very back of this property does not meet the historic zoning guidelines in the best fashion. I really think that having that second page of the photographs with the view from Lewisburg Avenue, if that hedge were not there, I have the photograph with the line, going back. If that hedge were not there, your eyesight is going to go straight back to where that garage is at the back of the property. I think more so than if it were up closer to the house, because the house itself would block much of the view of that. And the other part of it to me that is not in keeping with your guidelines, the garage, none of the garages there are that far back on the lot. They're closer to the houses. That's the way people did it in those days. They had the garage, 30, 40, 50 feet from the back of the house, not 130 feet from the back of the house. So it's really not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood in that respect. It's not respecting that tradition. And that whole section of Lewisburg, from the antique store to Berry Circle, there aren't structures on the back of those properties. Those properties get deeper and deeper as you get towards Berry Circle. And at my end, you can look back there, right and left, and it's beautiful green space. And this garage there will be right in the middle of that. Will not just affect me, but property owners, more than just the next door neighbors. So to me, that's and to me, since the height of this garage apartment, it can't exceed the height of the main house, no matter where it is. It could be in a ditch, it could be on a hill.
Correct.
Well, right, so to me, putting it, back there, because the land's a little bit lower, that doesn't really seem pertinent to me. And just a nice little thing to tell you all about. The lady that used to live there, Ms. Garner, Josephine Garner, who lived there, probably 50-plus years, she told me that the area where this garage apartment is and in my house, they leveled those two parts of these backyards to play. They had neighborhood croquet tournaments, So to me, that's sort of a nostalgic little nice thing that supposedly boards like this are trying to protect and not put, what looks like a second house back there with this huge dormer. To me, it's just... Then I do want to say, really just two more points. One, it seems to me that placing the garage back there is disadvantageous to the owner, of which, of course, I have no right to speak for the owner. But it's my understanding this house is being built to be sold. So it's not like, you know, the owner has their heart set on having this garage back there. And it's my understanding that it would cost more, I guess, because of the additional driveway. It also seems like it would not be a good selling point because most people want garages, you know, closer than 130 feet from the house. And then I would say, and Amanda, I mean, surely this is in the city's body of knowledge, if I'm correct on this. I was told when I bought my property, which was 1981, that the railroad had something like a 20-foot easement that comes up. They said, you know, I guess it was the realtor that told me that. He said, now you need to understand that the railroad could confiscate some of your backyard here if they wanted to. So I don't know. I mean, I've always thought that. So I don't know if that's correct or not. It stands to reason to me that that would be correct.
And I'm happy to speak to that when Ms. Haddock's
Yeah,
finished.
we need to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, I
Ms.
will
Haddock.
wrap it up. I would just ask that maybe the architect, I don't know if you want copies of those pictures, but I'd be glad for you to have those if you would like those. And that's all I have to say. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Did you want to comment, Amanda?
Yes, I'm happy to. I know that CSX Railroad does have easements located on either side of the railroad track. I don't know what that easement is specific to this property, but that would certainly preclude any construction being approved by the city. If it's determined that there is an easement, then the accessory structure would simply have to move in order to accommodate the easement before any sort of construction would be approved by the city. I don't know if the applicant knows specifically what that is, but it does currently meet the requirements of the city of Franklin for its own zoning district rear yard and side yard setbacks. So that could be something that is looked at a later date if the construction is approved by the Historic Zoning Commission. And if it were to be required to be moved, that would come back to the commission as well.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would love to speak to some of those comments. I get the desire for one to be in your backyard and see on all sides and see beautiful green. Unfortunately, that's urban life means you've got your backyard and you don't necessarily have access to everybody else's rear yard. We are in compliance with what's allowed in the zoning ordinance for a garage addition or garage piece. No matter where we put it, it's going to be visible probably from her yard. So if you want to add this to an approval motion, glad to add any landscaping if that's of help to screen our garage from the adjacent property. But regardless, it's kind of the nature of living in downtown. I understand that from where I live and on Fair Street. I look to the left and I see garages. I look to the right and I see garages or sheds, and that's just part of being there. So while I respect her opinion, that's just the nature of this. Our owner desires for the garage to be back there, so that's why we've shown it there. So we're trying to be respectful of their request, and would appreciate your approval.
Thank you.
And happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the third phase of this project? Do you want to speak, sir? Yep.
Oh, yes, please. I would like to add one more comment.
And if you'll introduce yourself again real quick.
Yes, ma'am. Matthew Smith, 906 Studio Architects. The garage was placed towards the rear following the first DRC meeting. And there is flexibility in that regard. We would be happy to move that closer to the front. I don't have a number of feet in mind, but I personally love croquet. And so I could see it moving a croquet field width up, I think. and there is flexibility from the owner in that regard. Thank you.
If the commission wants to consider a condition of approval that modifies the proposed location, I would want you to specify, or just keep in mind rather, that right now the garage is designed to be exactly a foot shorter than the house if it were sitting on even ground. So it is shorter than the house. Now, it might appear less short as it gets closer to the house, but it would still be shorter than the house. I just wanted that to be clear if there was any confusion about that. Thanks.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to follow up the last motion with another deferral. Since we
Okay.
deferred, let's do this as well. Let's actually see it on paper and have discussion about this project too.
Okay, so that's you move
To
for.
defer. To the next voting session of the Historic Zoning Commission.
Okay.
I'll second that. And one of the reasons for my position on that is because even though we have this accessory structure meeting the recommendations from the guidelines in size and placement, in mass and intricacy, it is not subordinate, I don't think, to the main structure. That's my opinion.
Another, go ahead, Tyler.
We've got a proper motion and a second. So all those in favor of.
I was gonna
Oh, do you wanna
give just a
speak?
couple, yeah.
Go ahead.
I think I have similar comments about the dormer, and you're the architects here, but it seems like the dormers being at a lower bearing don't adversely affect the plan. The bathroom and closet still work. But I think it would alleviate some of Ms. Haddock's concerns too, and my concerns as well, that we've got essentially flat roof dormers, which I don't consider as historically appropriate on pretty much any building. I think if those could be brought down, that would go a long way in helping. I don't mind the long dormer that dives into the gable. I understand the reasoning for it, and its position is about as good a place as you could put it if you have to have one. But that bearing height of those dormers is just too much. We're getting too square on top of that roof. That's my opinion.
That, I had taken a picture of this afternoon and sent it to Amanda in your neighborhood. I feel like that the dormers feel more like boxes. They, to me, the elevations of them do harm to the historic character of the area. And something more like this little, which you may have done that, I don't know, gives it more character that's in keeping with a neighborhood.
So for the record, just to clarify, this photograph is from Fair Street?
It is, and I got the property owner knew I took the
Yes,
picture.
and what you're seeing is a shed dormer, which is a different shape than what the applicant's proposing on this proposal, but
Right.
it is on the wall, but you can definitely see, even though it ties into the overall
There's
ridge
two
line.
different kinds of dormers.
Yes,
on
there
this,
is also a
yes.
shed on the other side, that it does appear to be just less volume, and it has more pitch to it.
And I deliberately took that shot to show everything, but when you walk by, it doesn't appear to just overwhelm the roof line. So, okay, we've got a proper motion and a second to
I
defer.
have one more comment.
Oh, do you want to comment?
Yes.
ma'am.
I want to go back to Ms. Haddock's comment that this looks like another house on the property. And I think having a building this large, an accessory structure this large relative to a Cape Cod it's just too large of a building. And so my preference would be that the building not be a 3-car garage, but a 2-car garage.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Is there any comments on the location? Do we need to address that?
Well, I meant to say something about the location. It is a bit odd that it's pushed all the way in the back. I get the reasoning for maybe separating it from the house, but, you know, my outdoorsy mind thinks I'd rather pave less of my green space, which, I mean, the longer the driveway gets, the more, it gets swallowed up. I don't know what the number ought to be. I know that other jurisdictions around the state and country have rules that are anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. There's neighborhoods in Nashville that are allowed to be 6 feet. I would not say that this is one of those properties. But setting it that far back seems, we don't comment on use, but seems from a use standpoint kind of odd to park your car and walk through the dark carrying groceries 130 feet. But to each their own. But yeah, moving it up within 30, 40 feet of the house seems more appropriate to me, just from a scale and massing standpoint too. It feeling like it belongs to the house instead of a separate house. I don't think it helps the argument that it's looks like a separate house when it's 130 feet away, because it looks like it doesn't belong to anybody. It's in the middle of a bunch of houses. From the layperson who doesn't know where maybe fences or property lines end, it's going to look like a house in the middle. So,
And to add to that comment, our guidelines do state that accessory structures should be located in traditional locations. And a traditional location would be within that 20, 30 feet. I think 130 does seem to be unique, for the community.
And to speak to what Ms. Besser said, this garage structure, guest house garage structure, is the size of the original Cape Cod house, if I looked at it correctly.
So it's proposed at 990 square feet for the footprint, and the house, without the addition, is proposed, or is 1,240, I believe.
Okay.
That's current conditions with the porch.
Okay.
That's right.
be 1,000.
So
they're
without the
getting-
porch, it would be comparable, yes.
Yeah. So I'd just offer that comment.
Yeah, and one thing too that I think I want to be mindful of is it is a really big site, and it is a really small house.
Yes.
I think the idea that the garage gives the homeowner some relief in terms of, well, I can't add on a lot to this house. It's never going to be allowed. There's some massing rules to anything that's attached, which is limiting, whereas the garage gives them a little bit of flexibility to maybe get that extra bedroom, that extra needed living space that the real estate market
Yeah.
might demand, and that those pressures are a real thing. So I'm sympathetic to the idea that it's a bigger garage because they might need it, but, being mindful not to overdo it. I don't know what that line is, but
Yeah,
yeah.
It certainly is a
Yeah.
challenge.
because it is a large lot. Well, we'll call for the vote if there's no other comments.
One other comment.
Oh, one other comment.
I'm
Yes,
sure
sir.
the applicant is welcome to return to DRC.
I need to know that right now, so, because I send the agenda in first thing in the
That's why I
morning.
wanted to bring it up.
So if the applicant would like to return to DRC, I'd love for them to let me know before they leave the room. They may need some time to actually look through. I know this is not a mini DRC, but, what we would ask the applicant to look at, if I'm recapping correctly, is just the general massing of this structure. Maybe it needs to be massed so it has more of a lean-to kind of component instead of a full upper story to kind of break up some of that. But being respectful that it could be larger, given that it's the constraints that Mr.
I
Lanier
think
now
that's what
mentioned.
people were saying, yes.
Yes.
Do you want to put on DRC and you can always just not come, but for safety?
We can do that. Go ahead and
Yeah.
put it on, and
Okay.
we'll decide if we want to present.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we've gotten some good feedback, so we probably
Yeah.
can do it without it.
okay. All those in favor of the motion to defer, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, it passes to defer it to the next Historic Zoning Commission. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, can we take about a 5-minute break, please?
6:45.
So everyone, there is a request to take a short break. Do we need a motion for that, Mr. Squires? Okay, so we will return by 6:45 PM. Thank you.
Thank you. free to reconvene after a short break. Thank you. And we are on item, is it 5? Yeah, item 5. So staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a 2-story principal structure with attached rear loading garage at 122 Harlansdale Court. This item appeared before the DRC at its July 19th, 2021 meeting to discuss the building massing, and then it returned to DRC at the November 15th, 2021 meeting. So as I said, the applicant is proposing the construction of a 2-story house with an attached garage at the rear. Just as a reminder, the lot configuration and street location of this lot render a different building envelope than others in the neighborhood. So the proposed garage form is not entirely consistent with historical equivalents, but the DRC did support this configuration during the massing discussion in July 2021. The average height of adjacent buildings in the neighborhood is approximately 36.8 feet. The proposed scale of 2 stories and height of 39 feet 10 inches is consistent with the guidelines, as it falls within the range of 10% above the average for the neighborhood. The proposed materials of the new construction are listed as white painted brick, cementitious siding with a 5-inch reveal, standing seam metal roofing above box windows in the front dormers, composite shingle roofing, brick foundation, and stone chimneys. The materials and architectural features are consistent with those found on adjacent buildings and keep with the context of the neighborhood. The lot is approximately 15,424 square feet, and the building footprint is 4,207 square feet, making the proposed building coverage approximately 27.3%, which meets the intent of the guidelines. Therefore, it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the proposed new construction with the following conditions. To meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, specifically 8.2.5.b.1, the 2 front-facing dormers must be set back a minimum of 1 foot from the exterior wall. The windows must have historic profile and dimension and consist of either wood or a composite material with the appearance of wood. The window and garage door specifications must be approved by the preservation planner or the Historic Zoning Commission prior to issuance of a building permit. The application must meet the requirements of the City of Franklin Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to issuance of a building permit. And this COA is contingent upon the applicant receiving approval of an appeal of administrative decision regarding an interpretation of the floodway fringe overlay district boundaries based on a FEMA letter of map revision based on infill, which I believe the applicant already has. It just needs to come before the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then finally, any changes to the approved plans must be submitted to the preservation planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for approval prior to work commencing. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant want to speak to the project?
Matthew Smith, 906 Studio Architects, and I would be happy to answer any of your questions or concerns. As you know, it's a challenging site, and we've worked hard to make the design consistent with what the owners want regarding the program and with the HOA and with the zoning requirements. Thank you.
Did you want to say anything about the dormers? Because that was the one change staff's recommending that's...
Yes, we'll comply with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And Ms. Chair, I'd like to add, just to clarify, there was a question about that. The requirement from the zoning ordinance for the dormers to be relocated to be 1 foot off the wall is in fact a requirement. The Historic Zoning Commission would not be able to remediate that in any other way. It is, we are able to comment and relax on things that are called out specifically by our ordinance, but in this case, the ordinance is very clear that wall dormers are not appropriate for a front elevation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion from the board? Oh, public comments. Anyone? I think there's no one. Is there any citizen that wishes to comment? No. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion from the board?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed new construction and perimeter fencing based on staff analysis and recommendations dated March 14th, 2022.
Thank you.
Just real quick, that is a typo. There was not the perimeter fencing in this application.
Yeah.
I apologize for
Oh,
that.
okay. Mhm.
Okay,
So,
just remove perimeter fencing. Is from the motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, is there any discussion? From anyone?
Is it, if these dormers are moved back, are they allowed to have inset dormers on the fronts of buildings in the guidelines?
That's a great question. I do think that there should be a condition of approval that requires that the dormers be altered and returned to staff for approval in light of the guidelines, just so we're able to review those and make sure they still meet the intent of the guidelines prior to moving forward.
Okay.
Inset dormers could meet that as long as the actual wall of the dormer sits 1 foot off.
Okay.
I do think that could be appropriate
Do you
for
want to
this.
offer that as
Sure,
an amendment
sure.
to the main motion?
Sure, so we have motion,
And a
second.
second.
Sure.
And now we're
Madam
gonna
Chair, I
have
move to
amend-
amend the original motion by adding and new dormer composition be reviewed by Historic Commission staff.
Thank you. Is there a second to that amendment? Second, okay. So now we have the main motion as amended.
We have to vote on the amendment.
Oh, vote on the amendment, right. Okay.
I
all
have a
the-
question.
Yes, sir. We can have discussion.
Just for curiosity, what is the pitch of the dormer gables? I mean, the dormer roof?
One extreme to the other.
Currently, the two front dormers are slightly different pitches. The one over the main body of the house would be, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it would be approximately 912.
Okay, just curious, thank you.
812, 912. And then the one over the secondary would be slightly lower,
So
something
the-
like 7.
The expectation of staff, if staff were to review this for compliance with that regulation, is that the dormers not be placed any higher on the roof, meaning the area where the dormers start would still stay in line, but they would be inset. So it would change the pitch to be less steep.
Yeah, my concern is that when you look at this front elevation, you can see the right wing is at a lower bearing height, and the center section has a taller, it's probably part of that wall is in the second story, is that
Right.
correct? And so if the dormers are to have a piece of roof that falls in front of them, then they would have to go up on the roof, and the windows would be chest high to people inside. That's why I was asking about the recessed dormer, if that's allowed. The windows could stay the exact height off the ground that they are today, as shown, but they would push back into the roof. And so instead of an Audi, we've got an innie.
So the intent of the regulation of the zoning ordinance is that we have no wall dormers. And so I do believe that an inset dormer would meet the intent of the regulation. Now, I am not the zoning administrator, so I cannot say with full certainty, but I do believe that the intent is to have dormers that sit on roofs. Now, that's not entirely the case, but I do think that it would get it off of that front facade wall.
Okay.
What was your concern, not making the head height of the
No,
dormer window higher, or?
Yeah, I was thinking they probably don't need to be. The consistency of dormers across the front in terms of head heights of windows and bearing heights is probably something that adds to kind of the historic nature of the facade. So I was just making sure that the feedback wasn't pick these dormers up and put them higher on the roof.
No.
Okay.
And I appreciate you commenting on that, because that's definitely not staff's intent. There's a dormer that you can see here that just has a little less pitch to it, that's about a foot off the wall, not a little bit more. I know that changes the configuration slightly, but
Yeah, and it's the difference in that one is that
It
the
sits on
bearing
the
is a
roof.
lot lower. There's less wall beneath
Absolutely.
it. And so they won't be treated the same just
Mm-hmm.
because of that nature. But I think a recessed dormer's something we can find in lots of historic contexts.
there are
and,
some in this neighborhood.
Yeah, lots of beautiful little copper pans that go in them that can be great. I just want to make sure we weren't telling you to put it on top of the roof just for the sake of putting it on top of the roof.
But one other clarification, it seems like this is DRC, and I may have misunderstood, that there's really not a second story in that area. Those are vaulted ceilings.
It is a vaulted ceiling. That's a great room on that second floor.
So
So that
that-
it's not an egress window. Those aren't
Yeah,
egress windows.
So Mr. Lamarinel's point is well taken, but it wouldn't necessarily cause issue if this
In
is
this
not serving an
particular-
upper level.
Sure.
Yeah.
As long as the head height stayed the same, the window could get shorter too.
It is an upper level room, just to clarify. It's an upper level bonus room with a vaulted ceiling.
I see.
Okay. So we've had the motion, and we've had it seconded, and then we've had the amendment, and we've had it approved. So
We haven't voted on it
we
yet.
haven't voted on that. Someone's,
ma'am.
okay, excuse me. Okay, now we will vote on the amendment.
Correct.
All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So now we will vote on the main no?
I have a couple comments.
Okay,
I apologize for various reasons. I have not really had a chance to be involved in this. But it just seems to me, then, first of all, do we know the height of this relative to the other buildings?
we do. It's
And-
about, isn't it a couple of feet taller?
We have that information. I did that analysis on a previous recommendation related to this subject property. Ms. Hensley noted that it is within that 10% range of the average. It is on that higher end, but it is below that 10% range, yes.
And
Just
it
below.
just seems that the height of the roof is, to me, overpowering when I look at the elevation. But that's, again, I'm coming in late in the game, and I realize that, but that's my comment.
Yeah, I think the side elevation, the side profile probably shows it better. I'm
I think we're
always-
getting
Yeah.
to DRC quickly,
Yeah.
which this isn't with this conversation, but. Are there any other comments? So
I'd like to speak on what I
Okay,
started,
yeah,
please.
sure, go
Thank
ahead.
you. The side elevation shows it better because you have to realize in a 2D drawing, roofs are receding away from you, and it's always going to look like a lot more roof. And so I think it is a mitigating factor. When you look at it at the side, there's not a ton of roof. Even though the front elevation really does look like it, I would. It's reasonable in my mind for a steeper pitched roof, which is common on. This is that farmhouse Tudor style kind of thing that people are doing, and it's a fine style, but it is indicative of longer, steeper pitches, so that's what I'd say about that.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Does somebody else have a comment? Okay, we're now voting on the motion as amended, so with one amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're to the factory at Franklin.
Yes.
Staff.
All right, item number 6, consideration of alterations to fenestration and entrance elements and siding, and then some partial demolition at 230 Franklin Road, which is the factory at Franklin. The applicant's requesting this series of work. The subject property is the site of the historic Dorch Stoveworks, listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its significance for commerce and industry, as we all very well know. The plant was constructed around October 1929 and finished in spring of 1930. The DRC did discuss this proposal at its January meeting. The applicant hosted a site visit, which was very helpful, at its February 15th special called meeting. And then it appeared before the DRC to discuss a revised proposal based on those site visit comments at its February meeting. So we're very excited to have the proposal here. I'm just going to briefly go over the proposal. The applicant did sort everything by building, so I will follow suit. This is the overall site plan. This does not include everything that was talked about at the last DRC meeting or the site visit. These are select elevations, select buildings. The applicant is working toward a more refined set of elevations for the remaining elevations that you did not see in this plan today. So for building 3, there are some alterations proposed to remove a non-historic awning, to change the fenestration pattern slightly, to replace a non-aluminum storefront with a new storefront that matches the color and profile of the adjacent historic windows, to demolish a non-historic connector between building 3 and the adjacent building 2, I believe, right here. The proposal to build an elevated concrete patio in front of building 2 that's accessible by stairs and an accessibility ramp. The rightmost facade window is proposed to be altered to accommodate a door right here. You can see the difference between here and here. And then a hollow metal door at the far left of the facade, way over here, is proposed to be replaced with a full light glass door. So my analysis, I won't read it verbatim, but essentially it is all the proposals in Building 3 are supported by the guidelines, with the exception of altering a historic window, which you see right here. So the guidelines support maintaining original historic windows and their opening dimensions. The DRC did visit this site and did talk about this at length at the last meeting. This was something that the DRC felt more comfortable allowing and limited uses throughout the site. So the guidelines would recommend against it, but I did want to note that the DRC seemed to be, in general, supportive in limited uses throughout. Moving on to Building 11, which is the main entrance building. There's a proposal to remove the non-historic canopy to restore the painted sign that is on the gable here, to take the loading bay and remove it. The loading bay changes grade. I mean, you physically could back a truck up into it and it goes down. So they even out that grade, take out that door and change it to either a storefront door that kind of emulates the appearance of the loading bay in the light pattern, or to actually do the very same thing, but it be functional as an operable glass door, kind of like a garage configuration. The proposal also includes replacing the new storefront material to something that's more cohesive and indicative of the color and pattern that you see on the historic windows. Because right now, all of those storefronts are that raw anodized aluminum. So in general, the removal and replacement of non-historic elements is appropriate. The preservation and maintenance of the historic wall sign painted onto that masonry is encouraged by the guidelines. The removal of the loading bay is generally appropriate. At the DRC's recommendation, the applicant did decide to change the proposed loading bay door to the configuration you see here. And I had the option of either doing the fixed or the operable door. The previous proposal was to have a storefront more consistent with what you see here. So the proposal is consistent with the DRC's recommendations now. The guidelines do support using an aluminum storefront configuration that is in keeping with the age and architectural style of the building, which the applicant's proposing to do. Moving on to building 2. This building.
Ms. Rose,
Yes,
it
ma'am.
seems to me that we should be looking at buildings just one at a time and not doing this overall motion.
We can certainly do that, but the motion is all one motion. I did not break up motions into individual buildings. I had planned on doing that, but the general consensus of staff is that we can support the overall motion, or overall proposal with very few conditions. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview of what we have here. If the chair would like me to do something differently, I certainly can.
Well, I think it's fine for if the commission or the applicant, either one wants to say something after each building.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll go back to building 2.
Yeah, thanks. Benton Smothers with Holiday Properties. I don't really have any specific point on each building, but just a general note. Adapting industrial buildings to mixed use is tough. And these are 90-year-old buildings in a historic overlay, and it's even tougher. So we're trying to, accommodate as best we can, and I really appreciate you guys being open to these changes, because it's really going from a very inward focused center to trying to get that experience outdoors, which is really what is the market is demanding right now. So anyway, this is based on feedback from the 2 DRCs and the site visit. I think we've come a long way. We kind of haven't gotten everything we wanted at this point, but this represents, I think, what we can, what we need, right? So anyway, that's just general comments. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be very brief on the remainder if you would like me to.
Okay.
So building number 3, this building fronts Franklin Road. There are very few changes. The only changes proposed at this point, after conversations with the DRC, is to refinish the EFIS portion of the building by placing a metal panel over that. Staff did not recommend a specific panel type. The applicant is requesting a corrugated panel in a flat matte black color. The concern that staff had about using a panel is that panels will warp over time. I do think a smooth face would draw less attention to it, but it would probably have more propensity to warp. So using the corrugated, although it might draw more attention, as long as it's matte, it will kind of build in an accommodation for warping so you don't notice it quite as much. But the intent of the applicant is to cover the clearly non-historic configuration with something that might be a little bit more appropriate to the context and the style of the building itself. The guidelines do recommend against introduction of architectural materials if they did not exist historically, but because this is EFIS and it's highly inappropriate for use in a historic district, adding this element to attempt to mitigate that could be supported. The applicant also wants to add a window back on the left side elevation where one had been bricked in previously. That definitely can be supported by the guidelines as well. So moving on to the right side of this building, there are no changes proposed except to remove the connector between this building and Building 3, which I already mentioned. Moving to Building 6, this is the theater building at the rear of the property. The only proposals are to paint the previously painted CMU block on the building from the fun orange color to a black color. Being facetious. And then also to add some, restructure the outdoor seating here. Right now, there's some outdoor seating, but they'd like to restructure that into something that's a little more elevated. The analysis demonstrates that those are appropriate changes, so long as the outdoor seating area is not done so in a way that would result in changing the opening dimensions on this building. I don't know if the intent is to wrap it around more. The windows and doors need to stay where they are. Going to Building 12. This building is facing the back of the property, the back and left of the property. You can kind of see from the key at the bottom of the screen. This is a proposal to paint the metal in the CMU block and to replace the aluminum entrance doors with storefronts that match the existing opening widths. The painting of the previously painted masonry and the metal is appropriate. Replacement of the non-historic aluminum storefronts with ones that better match the detailing of the historic windows is appropriate as well per guidelines. They want to match the widths, not necessarily the heights. They are non-historic currently and do not seem to meet any sort of historic opening dimensions. So having them higher could be appropriate, but not going any wider to remove any sort of historic material. Now, the south side of this building facing the courtyard, this is sort of the Liberty Pike side of the building. There is an existing wing wall that's proposed to be repaired and maintained. That is a recommendation of the DRC that the applicant do, so that is supported. The two select center windows, you can see here, are proposed to be altered slightly so to allow for the placement of entry doors. As I mentioned previously, the alteration of historic windows is not recommended by the guidelines. The applicant has heeded the recommendations of the DRC, however, by lowering the window sills at the center of the windows only so that the single glass door could be added without damaging or removing the entirety of the historic windows. So that is sort of a mitigated compromise that the applicant's proposing based on those DRC comments and could be supported in theory. The guidelines are written to reinforce historic window maintenance, and that would be a call that the Historic Zoning Commission would need to make. So in summation, it is recommended that the commission approve the proposed alterations and partial demolition with the following comments, that those opening windows, or the original windows and openings, be preserved and maintained. So those select windows on Building 3 and then the court side of Building 12 cannot be supported by staff because of the way the guideline reads. All new storefronts and doors must fit exactly within the existing opening width, so that means that there could be no additional historic masonry removed in order to accommodate wider widths. Their profiles, colors, and materials must be selected to closely match that of the existing historic windows. The historic windows have a more darker bronze color, so that is the intent of the applicant with the materials they provided here. The construction of the outdoor seating must not result in changes to the existing opening dimensions of any entrance doors on the building, including Building 3 at the front, which is one thing I wanted to make sure I was very clear about. I want to make sure that the outdoor seating does not exceed the height of the existing steps here, so that it doesn't cause any sort of change to the door height. The Historic Zoning Commission needs to specify within its motion, if it chooses to approve, whether or not to utilize a smooth panel or a crimped or corrugated panel on Building 2. Here. I noted the pros and cons of each to you. That is a recommendation that the Historic Zoning Commission needs to codify in some kind of a motion. The applicant may touch up the historic wall sign on the front of the building, but it needs to do so in keeping with the intent of the guidelines, which would be that it can use new paint so long as the new paint matches the design of the original, and that honestly that the building does not have the signage restorated. It's been a long night. Over-restored to the point where it no longer provides the evidence of the age. So that is something that we want to note specifically. Otherwise, it must meet all the other requirements of the City of Franklin prior to issuance of the building permit, and any additional changes come back to the staff or the commission for consideration of approval. Thank you.
Okay. Do the applicants want to say anything else?
Hi, I'm Luke Dougal with Centric Architecture. I think Amanda really highlighted all that we want to do. We're excited to be making changes to the factory and would welcome any questions or comments you guys may have.
Thank you. Are there any citizens that wish to comment to this project? No? Okay. Do we have a motion from the zoning commission, historic zoning commission?
Madam Chair, I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed alterations and partial demolition. And with regard to recommendation number 4 on the smooth or crimped panel, that we include the corrugated metal panel for use
Okay.
where proposed.
And is your motion with all staff comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, and now discussion.
I just want to say there's some things that I don't approve in this, and even though I approve of most of them, and so I won't be supporting the motion. But overall, I think you've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Is there anything that you would want to offer an amendment
You know, I
for?
think it would be hard to go back and pick it apart, honestly, and I don't want to do that. There's just some things, like when you start changing windows and doors, it makes me nervous, and you know me, I'm more toward the guidelines and more toward the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. That's just who I am, and so that's where I am with that.
I'd like to ask I think they're the garage, where the garage doors are on building 311. I think that's how it was listed.
Building 1?
Is it building 1?
Building 11 is with the garage.
On building 11, so we've shown two different versions of that, one with just solid windows and the other with garage doors. What would you prefer?
I think really we'd like the flexibility to go either way if you guys approve it. Really, I think it's going to be a tenant-driven decision. Some of those tenants might want the flexibility to open up and have the passage in and out. Others, if it's a nicer restaurant, may not want that. So the intent is that either option looks the same, and then, you know, depending on what tenants get leased, we can give them that option.
And I'm all right with that flexibility. I just didn't know.
As an owner, I mean, it is tenant-driven, and it's also thinking about who that tenant is and how you want that front area to kind of, you know, work. I mean, if you don't really want tenant patio space to bleed out in that front area either. So, you know, I can see a lot of value in having it fixed. But having that flexibility, I think the recommendation was, I think it was one of yours actually, for the overhead door. And it's a good idea, and so it's something that we want to explore with whoever goes in there. But it's probably going to be a restaurant, and you know, we would not want it to spill out on that main courtyard. So
Normally, and where windows and altering window openings, I'm very sensitive to that for the guidelines. Because of the adaptive reuse of this building and the change from being, a complete change to just a door in the middle, I think that is an acceptable compromise, especially for the adaptive reuse of this space. And that's why, normally I wouldn't support that. It is commercial, so I have to take a different consideration.
Thank you.
The comment I would make about that, I really think with the treatment of changing so many windows, the devil's in the details. And Amanda, have we covered that those would all be brought back to staff for review on how they're done?
Yes, that is part of the motion.
Okay.
I do think, just to be clear for the record, because I know that this is a National Register property and there's a lot of care to that. The only windows that are proposed to be altered are 3 out of the whole proposal. And any other storefronts proposed to be replaced are really non-historic storefront materials replaced with something that's a little bit more compatible with the historic windows. So just to be clear, there are not 20, 30 window proposals here. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear in this proposal.
I think in the alley that there were
There
several.
are
in the
a
alley
lot.
that wanted to change.
The alley is not part of this
That's right.
proposal, so
Okay.
as I mentioned at the beginning of my discussion, this represents probably about half of what we talked about through the DRC.
On page
Site
3,
visit.
there's 2.
One's existing there.
One's
Yeah.
existing.
There's just one that's a
One-
new.
One new
Yeah.
double door in a window. The other one's replacing.
Well, I'm calling that changing.
Yes.
Which page
Yeah.
is that? Because I'm just seeing two doors on.
Page 3. Maybe what I'm considering.
So yes, I'm talking about 1 at page 3 and then 2 on the courtyard
Oh, I
side
see.
of building 12,
Yeah.
which is on page.
Well, there's 2 on
16.
page 3. We're changing the configuration of the part that sticks out.
That is not actually a change of historic material.
Right, that is true.
The
But
intent
I
is to go
still
back in the
would
existing
like
opening.
Those things, the details.
Yes.
To come
Yes.
back to staff, and like when the painting's done on the front,
Mm-hmm.
if there could be a little,
Perhaps that should be a motion to be clear.
a little sample before it's, oh, oops, we didn't quite mean that.
Perhaps
And I
the
trust
commission can make an amendment to the motion to be very clear about these expectations.
that I would wonder if somebody would make a motion that the details of the changes come back to staff for review.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the motion that the details come back to staff for review.
Thank you. Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, so now we have a motion to approve with, if I remember, the corrugated metal decision and with staff recommendations as part of the motion and of the main motion, and then on the second, that the details come back to staff for approval. I think is that it?
And just for the record, this was not make it or break it for me, because I understand the scope of this has been challenging, I'm sure. But on the page 3, building 3, the inserting of a new door entry, I've said from the beginning that for this particular facade, that I didn't think it was in line with the guidelines to do that. I understand why you're asking for that, and the motion as it stands approves that. I'm just saying for the record that I don't support that particular door entry.
Well, I want to be clear, the motion as it stands does not support that. The motion is that those alterations could not be supported by the guidelines.
Okay.
So if there is a misunderstanding, that needs to be clarified before there's any further vote. Mr. Lamarinel's motion was to approve with conditions, and he clarified that on condition 4, it be a corrugated metal. On my staff recommendations, condition number 1 says that The proposed alterations to select window locations at Building 3 and 12 are not supported based on the guidelines. I just noted, however,
So-
that that is following the majority of the DRC
Right.
comments.
Oh,
Okay. So, understanding that.
yes. Thank you for clarifying.
Everybody understands that.
That does
Okay.
help.
Would you like to amend your motion?
To allow
Can-
that,
Can you amend your own motion?
you can.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think-
Mr. Squires, can you,
You'll
would
take it
could you
back.
recall the motion, just like,
Just recall it.
or does it need to be voted on?
Was yours the original motion?
Yes,
It's been amended.
that's right. It can't be withdrawn now.
So someone would have to withdraw the amendment too, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
that doesn't require a vote, but I will say, if the second to any of those has to agree as well. So if the second to the amendment or the second to the motion says no, then it stays.
And
Well-
someone else can amend the motion.
Yeah,
Yes.
as
Well, or
chair,
myself.
I just want to make a comment. Since our recommendation right now is against that, and since you don't have your clients yet, you know, I feel like a couple of these that it would be preferable to not happen. It may sort itself out and not have to happen. So I don't see why we couldn't vote on it with staff comments. Then you come back if the client, if that makes sense.
Well, we do have one. and-
You do have a client for
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
one?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, it's a restaurant, and
Uh-huh.
I can't disclose what it is because
That's
we're in
okay.
negotiation.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of this is contingent upon what we get through here, right?
Right.
And so all these restaurants, they all want patios.
All want,
All
okay.
across the board, right?
Okay.
And so, when you're limiting the openings, you're limiting
Gotcha.
patios, and you're limiting opportunities to lease to type
Gotcha.
of uses that I think everybody really
Then,
desires.
then I just
That's it. And this-
thought on that one that you had told
In
me
this
you weren't
case, it
sure.
would deaden that deal.
Okay,
So now, I mean, that's not to say there aren't others, but it makes it very, very tough
okay.
to lease that space without
Okay.
patios. So.
So, you made
I
the
wish to
main,
amend. I did intend that, I think I misunderstood the language here, that because it says it's not supported from staff, but that the DRC recommendations were different from what staff had thought. So I thought, okay, we're going with what we had
Yeah,
all kind
uh-huh.
of discussed, and
yeah,
not all of us necessarily agreed on it, but the consensus was they were ripping that whole window completely out, and now we've kind of come to this compromise that we would just kind of tooth in this one door in the window composition. So, yes, I would like to make a
Offer us-
motion to amend the original amended motion
yes,
to include the alterations to the 3 proposed entries are shown in this application.
gotcha. To be approved as they're shown.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Is it okay for the chair to second that Okay, then I'll second it. Okay.
Discussion on that?
Yeah, is there any discussion on this amendment? Okay.
I too have a tough time allowing this, but considering we use this term historic fabric, and there's a lot, because there's a lot of building. And because there's a lot of historic fabric here, and we've thoughtfully looked at and considered all the different facets of this building, some of which are inside, around corners, upside down, they're everywhere. Though normally I wouldn't support something like this, I can be on board for some select openings in very specific places, which is, these are the places we kind of
And
talked about that I would, with heartburn, be okay with. So that's what I'll say.
And that's pretty much what I say. I was thinking today when I was reading this application, what a case study this would be on a reaction to a national pandemic and the adaptive reuse of a building, because the first go-round, if this was all internal, and now we're going external, which I think at some point is a reaction to where we are. So, don't love to change historic windows, but if you look at what this is bringing to this historic building overall, I think it's amazing. So that's why I'm supporting it. So now we need to vote.
On this amendment?
Amendment, yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. So that, now we've got a twice amended main motion, or three times? Three times. Twice.
Yes, ma'am.
We specified, did the corrugated
Corrugated was in the original motion.
motion,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
And then we
Then-
amended to say the
Say-
details come back to
Back
staff.
staff, so this is our third amendment.
Second amendment.
Second amendment.
Second amendment, okay.
Third point of emphasis.
Okay, got it,
And
okay.
I want to be clear, I caught this, your first amendment about coming back to staff, did that get voted on?
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did.
Have that the motion was made by Ms. Marquardt and seconded by,
You're-
or I'm sorry, was it Mr. Laster and seconded by Ms. Worthington? Is that correct? Okay.
And that was voted on, and then the second one was, and the corrugated that I was getting confused was in the first main motion. So I've got
So
it.
my understanding is that the motion is to approve the proposal with staff's conditions with the exception of number 1, and clarifying that number 4 is a corrugated panel.
Yes,
All details of windows and doors and the sign come back to staff
Staff.
for review prior to work commencing.
yes,
Okay. Is that clear to you
okay.
guys?
So now we're voting. Is that right? Yes. On the, okay.
double
All those in favor of the amended motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Okay, so the ayes have it. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good timing, too. It's not as late as last.
Not 9:30.
Well, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam
Is there
Chair.
a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're adjourned.